Okay, I am going to explain how I build a Pro Tools session from the raw tracks from our X32 Behringer digital console that we use at our church. So first thing, I'm going to create a new Pro Tools session. We're going to do the song Fill This Place from our 10:30 a.m. service, and we recorded this on 2/12/2023. And it was the 10:30 a.m. All right, so I'm going to save this to my documents folder. You can save this wherever you'd like. Our X32 is recording at 44.1, so that's what I'm going to keep this at. 32-bit float is ideal for for plugin processing. I'm going to bring over the windows I need just to this one main screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to import audio, and I'm going to find the song I want. In this case, I do want this this folder. I keep them all kind of organized by the Sunday, but I do want Fill This Place. I want it from the 10:30 a.m. service. And I know I don't want track one. I'm going to grab the rest of these. And I'm actually going to get rid of 8 and 9 because they aren't going to be helpful for what we're doing today. And then really important is I'm going to click the copy all button. And by doing that, it's going to add the audio to the session. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. So this is the Pro Tools session folder that Pro Tools has created. I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call this audio files. I'm going to tell it to copy all the audio files into this one folder. That means that when I save this session, all of the audio for the session will be included in the session folder, which makes it really easy for me to share this with somebody or back it up or whatever. If you add the audio files instead of copying them, it means that the audio stays in its source location, which means it's very easy for it to be separate from the actual session. That's a lot more work down the road. Now, in this case, I know that these tracks are exactly what I want. So I'm going to actually do new track for each of the files I've imported, but you could also add them to the clip list and build your tracks later. And doing it this way works out okay, but it creates a little bit of extra work for us because some of these channels are stereo channels. So the first thing I'm going to do now that I have all of these files added, you can see over here, they're just labeled the channel number on the mixing board. So in this case, I know that I have 4 stereo tracks here. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go, actually, I want to go to New Track. You can also hit Command N. I want to create 4 new stereo audio tracks. Samples is fine. And then I'm going to click the Create button, and that generates those 4 blank tracks. Pro Tools by default will always name everything audio and then a digit. So I know that in this case I have house, and then I'm going to hit Command, or in this case I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to hit Command right. You could also hit Control right. I know that I have drums is a stereo pair. I have piano, and I have pads. So I'm going to create those 4 tracks. And I'm going to hit Control equals or Command equals to take me to the mixer view. You can see my 4 new tracks over here, and I know roughly where the tracks are I need to combine. I know that 5 and 6 is a pair, 7 is click, 17 and 18 is the drums. I'm going to bring that over here. And I know the piano and the pads are somewhere in the mid. I keep hitting Control. Somewhere over here. So I'm going to drag that over there just to be a little bit tidier. I'm going to go back to the mixer view, and I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. And I know that these are the house audio files. I'm going to drag them down to a stereo track. I'm going to delete these 2 mono tracks. I prefer to use these in stereo pairs. So I know 17, 18 are the drums, so we can take a quick listen to that. I've soloed it. So that's that audio, and I can tell you also that 18 is the same. See that that's right. So I don't, because I know the tracks on the board, I don't have to do that for all of these, but now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to delete these blank mono channels because I don't want them. And then I am looking at the audio pairs down here, and I think 23 and 24 are my piano tracks. Sounds like piano to me. I'm going to grab those, drop them on the piano track. Same thing. I'm going to delete these unneeded tracks. And my guess is 25 and 26 are pad. Sounds good to me. I'm going to undo that little change I just made accidentally, and I'm going to drag these onto the pads track. Same thing, delete the 2 files I don't want. Great, so that is my stereo tracks done, and now I'm going to go through and label the other tracks. I know that for us, this track here is our metronome. It's the click track. I'm going to label it because I might use it. I do occasionally use it if I need to do anything trying to figure out where the right beats are. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now that it's labeled, I'm going to hide it and make it inactive. So it no longer uses CPU cycles, but it's available to me if I need it. Channel 10 is a vocal microphone for one of our guitar players. I'm not sure he did any singing in this song, but we'll label it for now, and we'll move it around later. 19, not seeing a huge amount. So I'm using this clip gain for me to just increase the volume level of those tracks without having to do compression or whatever else. It's just raising the volume. And looking at this waveform, this looks like bass to me, but I'm going to solo it and we can listen. Yep, that is our bass track. I'm just going to label it bass. Channel 20 and 21 are going to be electric guitar. One of them is going to be an electric DI, and the other one is going to be an amp that is mic'd up on the platform. And so what I can do pretty quickly to figure that out is if I listen to this track, just guitar, and if I listen to this track, I can hear it being much more roomy. So that suggests to me that it's the amp. And there's some other audio being picked up on this track that would not be present in a guitar DI. So I know that 20 is my guitar DI. So I'm going to do electric DI, which just means it's a direct channel. There's no other noise in there. And then this one is electric, and then you can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it electric amp because it just helps me kind of understand what those two tracks are. We have piano, we have pads, we know what those are, and then I have my vocal tracks. So I'm going to listen really quickly, just see who is who. There is a mercy. So I know that that is a person named Christy, so I'm going to label it. And this one is, I'm going to guess, is Amanda. Mercy strong. Yeah, so that's Amanda. And 30 is probably bass vocals. I'm not sure if he's singing here. Oh, nope, that's Lynette on the keyboard. She's our pad player as well for this Sunday. All right, and then this one will be bass vocals if he's singing. Yep, so that is Rob. And then by process of elimination, this one is going to be a guy we call Donnie. All right, so those are my tracks. They're all labeled, so it's pretty easy for me to figure out what everything is. And at this point, I would just start listening to the song, kind of figuring out where things were. You can use the house mix to kind of figure out what the mix sounds like generally. You can hear the room in there. There's people clapping, which is great. So you can kind of use that to kind of rough in your idea of what the mix is. This is where I start to set up some of the busing and other processing that I would normally use. So for me, it's actually a little bit involved. So we're going to step through that process right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N or Alt-Shift-N to make new tracks. Now, what I need are a whole bunch of audio tracks, some aux tracks, and a master fader. And I'll step you through exactly why I'm building each of those. But I need 3 bus tracks, vocals, instruments, and effects. That's 3. I need 2 more stereo tracks for the master bus processed and the master bus unprocessed, and then 4 more stereo audio tracks for my effects buses. So I need 9 new stereo audio tracks. I need 1 new stereo master fader, and I need 1 new stereo aux input. Now this aux input we can label pretty quickly. We're going to call that master processing. Master fader you can call master whatever you want. Master fader is there just as a convenience for yourself to kind of manage the volume in your session, and then those 9 audio tracks. So, okay. Those are all built. By default, Pro Tools builds them out just in numerical order. So the first thing I'm going to do is label those tracks. The first one I'm going to call instruments, and I'm going to hit Command or Control right to go to the next one, and I'm going to call it vocals, effects. I'm just going to step through these. I'm going to do master clean, master processed, and then I'm going to do plate verb, short, that is my short verb. So I'll do long verb, I'll do short delay, and long delay. I may not use all of these effects buses, but it is my standard process. just as we're kind of getting this going. So now I have all these random tracks that don't seem to have any function. So what we're going to do is if you come up into setup and you go to IO, if you look at all your different tabs here, depending on how you have things configured, you'll see a whole bunch of different outputs here or whatever. I just have I don't have any audio interfaces really plugged in. I'm just using the stuff built into the laptop. Same with the output. But over on buses, I have some things that are configured, and you can add new paths here if you want to. You can create a new stereo bus. You can call it taters, create, and then if we click OK here, in this option, I'll have taters down at the bottom, right? So what we can do is actually come in and configure the different buses and processes that we think we might need. Generally speaking, I have different buses that I use more often than not. I have a couple of spare just so I don't have to always add new ones. And then I call them what I expect to need. And you can do that in your system. It just kind of makes things a little bit tidier. So for instance, this right here is my instrument bus. On the input, I'm going to come up here and say instruments. Likewise, for vocals, I'm going to come up to the input and I'm going to say vocals. The way the Pro Tools works is this is your little I/O panel, and the top one is input and the bottom one is output. So we can just kind of step through this process and set the inputs and outputs as we want. Right now, we'll just worry about inputs. Master clean is going to go on a bus called master bus. Master processed is going to go on master bus processed. And then likewise with these plate reverbs, I just have some of these kind of default things labeled the way that I normally use them. The label of the bus doesn't have anything to do with what the bus does. It's just something you as a human can use to kind of manage the complexity of the session. Now this last one is a little bit interesting because this one's not an audio track, just an aux bus, but I'm also going to put this one on master bus. And I'm going to bring that over here just for convenience. And we're going to make the output of master processing master bus processed. And next what we're going to do is take our various audio tracks and route them to where we'd like them to go. So house is a little bit interesting because I'm not going to bus house together with anything else. So house is actually going to go on what I call the master bus. Now, all the instruments, bass drums, all the way down through pads is going to go on my instrument bus. So on my Mac, I'm going to hit Option Shift. On a Windows PC, you'd hit Alt Shift. And on the bus, on the output side, I'm going to say instruments. And you can see it has changed the output for all of these instruments to be the instrument bus. Likewise, for these vocals, I'm going to select them all, Option Shift, Bus, Vocals. Nice and simple. Now they're going to jump out onto the vocal bus. I'm going to do the same for my effects. I'm going to make their output the effects bus, which works out pretty simply. And then I'm actually going to take this master fader and for my own sanity, I like to have all of my kind of audio tracks and things like that on one side, and I like to have my effects on the other side. And the fact that this master fader looks a little bit different helps me do that. But all this master fader does for my session is it manages kind of the volume of my speakers in the room. Okay, now we've assigned our vocals and our instruments to their various buses, but you can see the instrument bus still just defaults to going out my normal speakers. That's just the audio output path. That's not really what I want in my session. What I want in my session is for the instruments now to feed into the master bus. And I want the same thing for the vocals, and I want the same thing for the effects. Now, what I have here now are some interesting changes to the way that my workflow works. Master Clean has an input of master bus, and it just sits there and it does its own thing. Master bus processing is not an audio track. You'll notice it doesn't have the I icon here, and it doesn't have a record icon here. This one is just for some audio processing that I do. So I put this one on the master bus process. It does its work, and then I take its audio and I put it on the master bus processed bus. And now this master bus processed is listening for that master bus processed audio. And the output of this one just feeds to this master fader. So what's happening here is all of my audio from my instruments, my vocals, the house channels, they all feed into this master bus. And then I can record the master bus or listen to the master bus clean. Or on this master bus processing track, I can add plugins. Maybe I wanted to put, a compressor over here, or I wanted to do, any kind of little changes to it. So I wanted to put this compressor onto that channel. The audio is going to flow through this aux. It's going to be compressed, and the compressed audio then feeds into my master process channel. And I can listen to this channel, and I can print this channel. I can record this channel, but I can still always have a clean mix bus output. So if I think maybe down the road I've overdone it, or I'm going to process it differently, I don't have to be committed to that audio. And likewise, I also have my instrument buses, and all of my effects are individually recorded onto separate audio tracks. Now, the problem becomes if we come over and we hit play, we can see that audio is flowing, but we can't hear any of it. And the reason for that is by default, these audio tracks are listening on buses, but because they're audio tracks, their default mode is to play back audio. But of course, we haven't recorded any audio onto these channels. What we want to do is listen to these buses. So to do that, we put these audio tracks into input mode. And as we put them into input mode, you can start to see audio showing up on those buses. Nothing on the effects right now because I haven't built those out, but you can see that audio is there. And now I can choose. This would be master clean, and I can hear that audio. And then down the road, once I do processing on the master bus, I can also listen to the master process audio. Right now, there's no change, but if we go in and we do something really crazy, I can put on like this crazy distortion. We'll crank up the drive, turn the output down so we don't blow our ears off. So that is running on there. So I have master clean. It happens to be an electric guitar at the moment, and some vocals. And if I listen here, the whole thing has got this crazy distortion on it, which is being added by this plugin, which I can bypass or unbypass. And that is the power of this master track. Now, I would never use a crazy distortion plugin on that track. Well, I certainly wouldn't use it like that, but it does allow me to record any effects that I might want to have on that channel. And so now, as I go through my session, when I go to do a final mix pass, I can actually hit record on the whole recording session. I can put all of my buses into record mode. I can record each of my individual effects if I want to, and I can then go through and capture all of the audio that's processed on those different things. So down the road, if I want to use just the instruments for something, I have the instruments recorded. If I just want the vocals for something, I have the vocals recorded. And likewise, I have my effects, and each of my effects down the road get recorded. And there's one more piece that we should mention here. Once you put these tracks into input monitoring, they will play back the audio on their respective buses. But if you were to come over and hit solo on a channel, you will lose all of the audio. So if I hit solo here, even though there's audio on that pad, you can't hear it. And to fix that, we need to put all of these new buses we've built into what's called solo safe. So if you option or command clicked on these solo buttons, it grays them out and it puts them into what's called solo safe. And you're going to want to put into solo safe all of the channels that you're putting onto these input buses. What that means is when you hit solo on any channel, these channels remain sort of routing audio. I'll show you what that looks like now. No solos. And then if I hit solo, even though this channel is soloed and everything else is muted, all of our solo safes remain functional, so we can still hear the audio. So any channel you put into input monitor, you should also put into solo safe. So now if you wanted to use some effects, what you can also do, I'm going to take these out of record just because we don't need them. If you wanted to put some effects on here, what I tend to do is on this effects bus, I would add a reverb. So I have a weakness for reverbs. In this particular case, my plate reverb of choice these days is made by Relab Developments, this plugin called the LX480. It's a really good rendition of the Lexicon 480 reverb. Plate is the one that I like. This RTM is the decay basically of the reverb. And I'm going to drop this down to 1.3 as is my general preference. And then I can kind of pick what it is I want to send to that reverb. So in this case, I know that the song is led by Donnie. And on my sends here, I'm going to go to the bus. I'm going to go to my plate reverb. And you get this little fader. And by default, this fader is at 0. You can drag it up with your mouse if you want to, or you can hit Option or Alt and click on the fader. It will drop it at 0. I'm going to go to my edit window very quickly. And I've got this, I can see here that Donnie is singing. And so I'm going to do is grab, stop doing clip gain. I'm going to stop doing that too. I'm going to grab a little bit of him singing, just so that it loops. I have my playback up here in loop. And so as he sings, it'll kind of run through. And if I put my plate reverb in input mode, you can see the audio there, and we can actually listen to Donnie's singing. All that other noise you hear is the house, because the house doesn't go through these buses. It just plays regularly. Now, everything you're hearing now is basically Donnie's microphone. It's just going to keep looping. Now, right now, there is no effect. And now that I've pressed this input monitoring mode, track input monitor, you can start to hear it. Now, what's really cool about having these buses is I now have the option as well of hearing just the effect. So if I turn off input monitoring on vocals, you can just hear that reverb. And you can make changes to the reverb if you want to. Say you want to make it really long. You can make it almost a minute if you want to. I'm going to dial it back to my preferred roughly 130. So that about does it. That's how I prep my Pro Tools sessions. It's a bit of extra work at the outset, but it does give you a lot of power in the session. Now, once you've done this once, there are some great ways for you to recreate this process without having to go through all this effort again. So I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to delete all of these tracks that I just made. Yes, delete them. I'm going to undo any routes or any other changes that I've made in this session, just to kind of give you an idea. So these are just those raw audio tracks, and they do happen to still be routed to buses. So what I'm going to do is come up to the File menu. I'm going to come to Import, and this time I'm going to select Session Data. And if you have a template you've built or anything like that, you can pull from that data. I know that the other day I built a session that used a lot of the same stuff. So I'm going to open this session from the other day. And you can see I have all sorts of tracks in here, but all of those fancy tracks that I built today for all the processing I like to do also exist in this session. So I'm going to grab those master buses. I'm going to grab my vocal buses, my effects buses, and it's going to build new tracks, as you can see here. And then what you want to do is click this choose button. And all we want to do is really import track information, but we don't care about automation. We don't care about audio. So anything related to audio, we're going to get rid of. Anything related to automation, we're going to get rid of, because the likelihood of me needing the same automation moves is extremely low. But output assignments, we're going to want send volume automation. No, no, no. Output assignments are fine. Plugin assignments, those are great. You can pull those over. Don't care about the automation. And then the rest of this stuff starts to get, a little bit nitty gritty. Most of the stuff just isn't going to be that big of a deal. If you have some of these settings, you want to turn them on and off, knock yourself out. But these are the ones that I like to uncheck for my session. And if I click OK here and click OK here, it's going to import the session data from that other session. And you'll see it's going to restore all of my tracks basically exactly as I would have built them. And you can see I've already got some other processing from that other session built in. My vocal bus has a compressor on it and a de-esser. And I have a compressor on the instruments. I've got a de-esser on the vocal effects. And all you'll need to kind of come in here and do is make sure that things look okay. Put these tracks into input monitor mode like we did in the other session. Put them into solo safe mode like we did in the other session, and all of this stuff will just continue to work exactly as you would expect it to work. And so you don't actually have to go through and do all of these changes every single time. And if you've got some standard processing you like to use, you can just pull it over without having to rebuild it. So it's a big time saver. So once you've built your session out into a way that you like, it's easy enough to just import that data right into the next session and save yourself 20, 25 minutes of doing that. So excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all in the next one.